I'm a native bee keeper and a native bee educator. I've been keeping stingless bees for about 15 years or so. So I breed bees, I sell bees, I work with schools and kindies. We do both stingless bees and solitary bees. So I run a small business with my wife, who's up the back there, Sharon. I call the Green Soul Native Bees. So we moved to the Sunshine Coast from Brisbane about 18 months ago. Loving it. It's fantastic. So having fun. I'm also on the executive of the Australian Native Bee Association. Who figured, there'd be an association for natives? It's only been around about since 2019, and I've been president and vice president and secretary, and now I'm branch liaison officer. You know when you volunteer for roles, folks, and you never really manage to escape? That's me. So today I'm going to talk about native bees, Australian native bees. Now there's some pretty jaw-dropping stuff here that a lot of people don't understand about bees. Does anyone have any stingless bees at home? Happy days, all right. What about bee hotels? People have bee hotels at home? Great, okay, all right. So I'll pitch it accordingly. All right, so where did bees come from? Bees evolved from wasps 125 million years ago. Some wasps would visit plants to hunt for prey, and they would accidentally get some pollen on them, and they would accidentally feed that to their babies, and over millions of evolutionary years, one branch of wasps started to solely feed their babies pollen, and that's where our bees came from. And that's now expanded to around about 25,000 species of bees worldwide. About 75 million years ago, our stingless bees evolved. Our stingless bees are the little bees. Everyone know what I'm talking about with stingless bees, the little 4 or 5 millimetre bees that we have? So wasps accidentally fed their babies pollen. It's just about the time when our flowers started to develop. So if you think of dinosaur days, pine trees, fern trees reproduced using spores, wind and rain. Suddenly our plants realise they've got a little insect that's going to transfer their pollen around for them. So they start to develop these big showy flowers and produce nectar to attract the bees and other insects to them. So we have our bees to thank for the diversity of the flowers that we have today. So our bee species have evolved alongside our plants accordingly, our flowers accordingly, and they've developed complex behaviours. We've got 7 families of bees worldwide, around about 25,000 species. We've got 5 of those families in Australia. Solitary through to highly used social. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But what is a native bee? It's not a honeybee. European honeybee came out in the 1800s to produce honey. Now I'm not going to diss the honeybee, but I'm not a honeybee keeper. But honeybees are extremely important to the food system that we have today. So they are critical to pollination of lots of our foods. But it's not a native bee, and it does outcompete our native bees for resources. So these are bees that evolved in Australia, and they develop complex relationships with Australian native plants. There are some of our native bees are the only ones that can pollinate certain plants. Honeybees can't do that. I'll talk a bit more about that later. So social versus solitary. What do we mean by social versus solitary? A social bee is in a perennial colony. Honeybees, stingless bees, they live in a colony. They have different castes, so they have a queen, they have virgin queens, they have worker bees, they have drones, and they last indefinitely until something happens, unless something happens. So we see these in our stingless bees. In case of our stingless bees, we see these little hives like this. They're only much smaller than a honeybee hive, but that's the sort of hive that we have for our social bees. Now, our stingless bees in Australia live in hollow trees. What do we do with hollow trees? Chop them down. So they end up in places like water meter pits, compost bins, worm farms, places they probably shouldn't be, but there's nowhere for them to go. So our stingless bees are tiny little, they're our only social bees. Now, versus a solitary bee. So a solitary bee is a female bee that makes a nest. So if you're thinking about a bee hotel, thinking about this stuff here, it's a tube. She collects enough pollen and nectar to make a little cell, and then she lays an egg. And then she seals it off, and she does it all the way through, and then she dies. Most of our bees only live for a few weeks, and most of our bees never get to see their offspring. Sad story. Ground nesting bees. Ground nesting bees make their nest like this. They make tunnels and they do the same thing. They make these little cells, put some pollen and nectar, lay an egg, seal it up. Folks, that is the normal world of bees. 95% of the world's bees are this. That's normal behaviour for bees. Living in a colony is actually quite rare. Australia has around about 2,000 species of bees. 11 of them live in colonies. We have 11 species of stingless bees, maybe a couple more that we know that they're there. But anyway, so 11 species that we've identified. The rest of them are solitary bees or social bees, or semi-social, which I'll go through in a minute. This is the normal behaviour for our bees. So 95% of the world's bees live in ground, and 70% of those bees live in the ground. And what do we do with our gardens? Put 10 centimetres of mulch over our gardens. We're literally, and we chop dead trees down, which is where our bee hotel bees, our solitary bees are going. They're going into bee hotels just there to mimic a dead tree with holes in it, generally the holes that have been made by borer beetles or rot or whatever. So what do we do with dead trees? We chop them down and we mulch our gardens. So we're literally taking away nesting spaces for our bees. So that's what I mean when I talk about solitary bees and social bees. This is a table that's got solitary bee stuff on it. So some cool facts. So we've got over 1,700 species that have been identified. We reckon there's at least 2,000, maybe up to 2,500 different types of bees in Australia. We are punching above our weight when it comes to our share of species across the world. New Zealand's got 28. Sorry, New Zealanders. Bit lame, isn't it? 28 species in New Zealand, and they're all quite little too. Lots of bumblebees, lots of honeybees. The other ones are quite small. We've got the smallest bee in the world, 1.8 millimetres. What's your chance of seeing a 1.8 millimetre bee in your backyard? Right? They love gum trees. And if you've got dead branches in your gum tree, chances are you've got Euroglossinae nesting in there. And this was a branch that fell out of a tree when I was in inner city Brisbane. And it's got these little borer holes in it. And the bees have moved in afterwards. And I've had an entomologist check that out for me and confirm that. So, look, you probably won't see them, but they're out there. I'm told by a Brazilian colleague of mine that Brazil does have one that's 1.8 millimetres long, but I'm taking it. We have few imported species. Honeybees are imported. Asian honeybees are up north, pretty nasty, declared pest. We've got bumblebees in Tasmania. We don't want them on the mainland. They are big, bully bees. They are great at spreading weeds. They will drill straight through a flower's base to get to the nectar, and they will heavily outcompete our bees. So we don't want them on the mainland. We've got African carder bees. They make like a silkworm, a bit like a silkworm nest. And they love electricity meter boxes, pretty harmless. Alfalfa bees, pretty harmless. About 6 or 7 imported species, but the one you know about is honeybees. 11 species of stingless bees, most others are solitary, as I've spoken about, and they nest in the ground or in pithy stems or dead trees. We have some semi-social bees share nests. So we have some bees that when they dig a tunnel in the ground, they will actually share that tunnel with other bees and they have their own little nesting spaces. Why would they do that? Because having bees up and down that tunnel constantly means protection from predators. Someone's always guarding. There's always someone around. We also have bees. The next phase of our bees are those that live in a nest like that, but some of the females stop reproducing and take on other roles, such as guarding the hive or working as nurse bees. That is a great step for evolution because the next step is our honeybee type arrangement. So scientists love that little piece because it shows them what the next step was in. So we have some semi-social bees. Only females sting. Stings are left over from being a wasp. Honeybees have developed their sting to defend their colony. Honeybee stings can be used over and over on little bugs trying to get into their hive. They're not supposed to come into contact with us. We have thick leathery skin and the honeybee sting has a barb and it gets stuck in our skin and then the bee tries to fly away and leaves half its guts on our hand. Bees don't want to die and they don't intend to die. It's just that they come into contact with us. And let's face it, most of the time when they do come into contact with us, it's because we've lent on them or we've stood on them. So I'm really clear with this about kindy kids. Leave them alone and you'll be fine. Versus hornets, which are just nasty. Hornets just come from anywhere and sting you. So only females sting. One thing you'll learn about bees is that male bees are hopeless. Male bees exist for one thing only, and that is to mate with a female bee, and a tiny fraction of them get to do that, and when they do, they die. Otherwise, we do not contribute to nests. We do not contribute to anything at all in the bee world. It's all about girl bees. So only female sting. Our stingless bees lost their sting. They have developed other ways to defend their hive. Has any of our stingless beekeepers here been bitten by our stingless bees? Yeah, right. So they can bite. They have mandibles and they bite. They don't just fly out of their hive and bite, but when we start opening their hives to split them or harvest honey or whatever, that's when they get a bit grumpy. But we do have some nice gentle species that I put in kindies. Our solitary bees, so things like our resin bees and our blue band bees, they can also sting. And they sting like a wasp. They don't have a barb. So they can sting like a wasp, so they will live, keep on living, because they sting. They don't have a barb on this sting. So only female sting. Most bees don't make honey. If there's something else to take away today, we are extremely fortunate that we are able to access honey from bees. Storing additional honey is not normal bee behaviour. Most bees in the world gather enough pollen and nectar to make that little cell and lay their egg. This storing of extra honey, for whatever reason, is really, really unusual among species. So our stingless bees do it and our honeybees do it. Native bees are great pollinators. I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. Why should we care about Australian bees? They are a keystone species, folks. It is our native bees that are pollinating all those fruits and nuts and seeds that many other animals eat. So without bees, there will be not... I mean, we'll be okay, and I'll explain that in a minute. But without those bees, our ecosystems will be in strife because our many, many animals rely on those bees to pollinate their food. Pollination, food security and diversity. As I said before, our honeybees are a critical part of our food system now in the way that they pollinate some of those broadacre crops that our stingless bees and our solitary bees will never be able to do. I was rung up by the canola industry a couple of years ago when the varroa mite first got in as a backup. Canola. Would the little stingless bees pollinate canola? No. Broad kilometres of flowers, and you've got to put your beehives around the outside because they spray so much, and it's cold where they grow canola. So, well, down south it was. So the answer was no, we don't. It's not going to be a backup. Our stingless bees are not going to be a backup for honeybees for some of those crops. Our stingless bees are great pollinators in little niche farms where you might have some macadamia, some mango, some avocado, some bush where they can feed at other times of the year, etc. So let's quickly talk about pollination. So pollination is about getting the pollen from the anther to the stigma of the flower. The pollen then sends a root down to the ovary. Plants are really smart. If they get the wrong pollen on them, they just stop that root from growing. Right? Plants are really, really smart. If it's the right pollen, and generally we like cross-pollination, that gets the better results, it will go down, it will fertilise the egg, and we end up with our fruits and our nuts and our seeds. That's the general gist about pollination, right? Lots of insects pollinate. So you might see grey pictures of a dead world without bees. It's not quite true. So we need insects or animals to pollinate about 65% of our food. It's not everything. Grain, for instance, wind pollinates. It doesn't need animals. So there is food that we can eat that does not need to be pollinated by an insect, but about 65% do. And bees do a big portion of that. But there are lots of insects that pollinate. So our flies, our dragonflies, our butterflies, our wasps, all those things that are visiting flowers are brushing up against that pollen and moving it onto the next plant. Then we have our marsupials, such as our possums and our gliders, etc. So lots of other insects pollinate. Bees are the best, and they're the only ones that we manage. So we move those bees around to pollinate. Has anyone heard of sonication or buzz pollination? This is really cool. Right, so what is buzz pollination? Buzz pollination is where, so 8% of the world's plants need buzz pollination. If you are growing those sorts of things in your garden, they require buzz pollination. Buzz pollination is where the anther of a flower is like a tube and the pollen is tightly packed inside and it has to be vibrated in order to release the pollen. Honeybees can't do that, and neither can our stingless bees. In Australia, only our Australian native bees can buzz pollinate. If you're growing tomatoes in your garden, it's not the honeybees that you see flapping around. It's the blue banded bees, the resin bees, the carpenter bees. They're the ones that are releasing that pollen. So that's why it's really important if you're growing veggies to encourage your native bees into that space. And I'll give you some tips on how to do that. Why would 8% of the plants make it so hard to pollinate? We don't know that. Who knows? So this is a blue banded bee. Everyone knows blue banded bees, right? Beautiful. Probably our most endearing native bee, to be honest. Most people know what a blue banded bee is. This was a video that was done by Adelaide University of a blue banded bee pollinating what looks like a tomato flower. So, slowed down. She grabs that anther, she disengages her wing muscles, and she starts bashing her head on that anther 350 times a second. 350 times a second. Notice that she has tucked her abdomen underneath the anther so that all the pollen falls out onto her scopa or her abdomen. This is happening in your backyards, folks. If you're seeing blue banded bees or other native bees, this is what they're doing out in your backyards. It's fantastic. I see these guys pollinating, doing this buzz pollination on plants that don't even need buzz pollination. They just seem to enjoy it so much. They go, yeah, I'll buzz pollinate out. So, what are some of our common bees? So our stingless bees, 11 species of stingless bees. I'm going to show you some pictures of these. These are the ones that are probably in your backyards now, right? These are the common bees that we hear about a bit. And obviously within each of those categories, there's lots of different species. So our stingless bees are like this. Now you may remember I said that boy bees are hopeless. I know this is a girl bee because she has this big pollen basket on her legs. Boy bees have skinny legs because they don't do any work. Our bees have these antennae. Our bees communicate using pheromones, which is a chemical that they detect with their antennae, like we smell a smell with our nose. Think of it that way. Scientists reckon our stingless bees could be communicating with up to 1,000 different pheromones. So when we think about a stingless beehive and we hear this term superorganism, absolutely it is a superorganism. That hive is in constant communication about what is required for the success of that hive. The queen is not in charge of that hive. If the queen stops laying eggs or gets sick, she will be killed and thrown out in an instant. It is all about the community of bees. Euroglossinae is the one I spoke to you about before. Tiny little bee. Look at it on a 5-cent coin. This is a small bee. And they're out there. Versus our great carpenter bee. These are beautiful bees. So mum is black and yellow and the male is brown with big green eyes. You can tell them apart from a teddy bear bee from the eyes pretty much. She's our biggest bee. She's our biggest native bee. Some people contact me saying they've got bumblebees. They're not bumblebees. We don't have bumblebees on mainland Australia. It's generally a great carpenter bee. 2.5 centimetres long, our biggest native bee. This is like a bomber plane coming into your yard. Has anyone seen these guys around? Right, they are amazing. They are just beautiful. And when you see half a dozen of these, buzz pollinating around a tree. It's fantastic. You know, all of the East acacias are out at the moment, the yellow ones, all along the side of the highway. If you can get to one of those, these guys are loving the East acacias at the moment. And I've also saw them a couple of weeks ago on my Tiburtina. So our grey carpenter bees are great. They nest in dead trees. So they're called carpenter bees because they chew, right? They chew. So our bees will chomp into a log, a dead tree, beautiful, perfect round hole, and then chew their nests out. They're bee nests. They are carpenter bee nests. So they love the softer wood like these paperbugs. In America, the carpenter bees are so ferocious they drop barns because they chew into the poles. This was North Stradbroke Island. We visit there a lot, and down near Home Beach there was this beautiful tree that I watched for many years. It was a dead tree in the middle of a beach track, so of course it got chopped down, didn't it? But and so our great carpenter bees, she can live up to 3 or 4 years. So she's one of our few bees that lives for that long. Most of our solitary bees die young, don't live for very long. So she will mate with a male, she'll make a nest, she'll have both male and female babies. The babies don't leave the nest for a couple of weeks, but they do stick their bum out and do pollen poos down the side of the trunk. And then they'll start exploring the world, and then mum gets sick of the kids. Know what I'm talking about? Mum gets sick of the kids, so she starts to boot them out one at a time. So this is where she kicks the daughters out first, and so mum will stick her head or her bum in the hole and not let them back in. And I watched this bee frantically chewing around the entrance trying to get back in, and mum wasn't having a bar of it. So eventually she'll get the idea, and she will leave and go and start her own nest somewhere else. Sometimes the daughters usurp the parents, the mother, and she will take over the nest. Mum's allowed to hang around, but she's not allowed to reproduce anymore, so it's off to the granny flat. She'll kick the boys out last. So the boys will spend their day going up into the canopy of a tree, and they'll find a spot and they'll just flap their wings like this and hover and wait for the girls to notice as they go past. And then when they get tired, they go home and mum gives them a feed. But eventually, I told you, boy bees are really funny. Eventually, mum will get sick of them as well, and they'll boot them out, and she will mate again and have another family in that nest. They're great bees. Keep an eye out for these guys. They're fantastic. They're bees. They're big. They're like this. Mean? Nah. No. It's going to happen to you. Yep. You're going to be out. Mum may not go and have another family, though. All right. Blue banded bees. 5 bands for a male, 4 bands for a female. So if you get close enough, you'll be able to see them. They are one of our long-tongued bees. That tongue is a straw. She can go right down into... Imagine having a tongue as a straw. That's weird. You'd be right down into the base of a flower and suck that nectar up. They've got these mandibles. They hang on to branches as well. Beautiful bees. They are a ground nesting bee. Oh, hang on a sec. So mum spends her day building a nest in the ground and collecting pollen and nectar for her babies, and she makes these little cells, as I mentioned before. The boy bees spend their day, they'll find a patch of flowers, and they'll patrol those flowers, and they will fight any other male that comes in, and they'll try and mate with any female that comes in, and then at night, the boys all get together and talk about the day's activities. So if you have blue-banded bees at home, grab a torch and go out at night and see if you can find the boys. They love things like string mobiles, those sorts of things, something they can grab onto quite easily. Very funny to watch. They will fight over the top position, and you'll think they're settled, and then they'll fly off again and come back. Very funny bees. Then they go about the next day and they're mortal enemies again. We can make nests for blue-banded bees. You can make little clay blocks for them, so I've got them nesting at home vertically. If you want to mulch your garden, at least you could make vertical things for them. Teddy bear bee, how cute is this? Same family, it's an amegala, very similar to the blue banded bee, just different, and big, brown, furry, buzzy bee, very cute. Not as numerous as the blue banded bees, I find. Masked bee, so called because of these beautiful markings on their face. Come in white, cream, yellow, orange, sometimes called the Banksia bees because they love Banksia, sometimes called cellophane bees because of the material they use in their nest. It's a spit, basically. They're making their house out of spit. No, I should have sealed them all in. I hope it's not a bee. Can't guarantee anything, though. It's happened before in a school, trust me. Sometimes, so they use this spit to seal there. So really easy to tell when you've got a masked bee nest, and I've got them through these bee hotels here. Very easy to tell a masked bee nest. Bad pollinator. They are one of the few bees that have this glossy black skin. She ingests the pollen and then regurgitates it rather than collecting it on the outside of her body and transferring it from plant to plant. So she's not a great pollinator, but she's a pretty cool bee. About 1 centimetre or so. We'll go into bee hotels. Resin bees, these guys are fantastic. They are numerous. This is a firetail resin bee, so called because of the bright orange abdomen that she has. Very numerous. Most of the bees in my bee hotels here are resin bees. And what I love about resin bees is that I make these what I call an observation block. And it's a bee hotel that you spy on. And these are full of resin bees. And I actually get to watch them grow. I actually get to watch the larvae grow into bees and then escape. So they are great. I'll put them in community gardens and kindies. This Mundi State School bought a couple and they put them on some mounts and they had leaf cutter bees in there and the kids can just go down and just check out what's going on. It's very cool. But they are very opportunistic and they will nest pretty much anywhere. Resin bees are great. And there's a few species in South East Queensland that we can follow. Leaf cutter bees, so called because of these discs in the leaves. If you are seeing these discs in your leaves at home, folks, it's not caterpillars and grasshoppers, it's leaf cutter bees. Especially if you've got roses. I plant roses for leaf cutter bees. My wife thinks I plant them for flowers for her. No. That might be a bonus. I plant them for leaf cutter bees. Soft leaves, roses, young lily pillies, etc. They love them. And so they will chew a disc. It's a very clean disc like that, and they'll fly it away. So grasshoppers and caterpillars tend to take the whole side of a leaf, if you know what I mean. So just be careful about that. If you see those discs out of your leaves, don't start getting the spray and spraying it all over the place. If they're on your roses, they're only after your leaves. They don't care about your flowers. These are great. We can get them in observation blocks as well. Very easy to tell a leaf cutter bee because they have these leafy sections at the entrance to their things. You will get them in bee hotels. And you can see here what they do. They take these chunks out of the leaves. So I had a rose bush a metre away from that bee hotel, and I can tell you within a few days that bee hotel was being filled with leaf cutter bees. Nomia bees. I put this up because as a great example of what can happen in your garden or your yard. This was a client at Kedron, Upper Kedron. And he has, if you can see that picture, there's a whole bunch of holes like this in his beautiful couch lawn. He loves his lawn. Beautiful couch lawn. He's got hundreds of bees under there. And they're just under the surface. This is a ground nesting bee. And if most of us saw a hole like that in our yard, we'd think it was a pest of some kind. It's not an ant nest. You know, the ant nests sometimes go high. It's not doing that. This is quite flat, which allows him to mow, etc., etc. These are nomia bees. Once again, the adults will roost together at night. The males roost together at night while the females are underground in their nests. If you see a hole in your backyard or a garden or something like that, if it's before 12 o'clock in the day, grab a cup of tea. If it's after 12 o'clock, grab a beer or a wine and just sit down and watch it. See if you can see anything come out of it. Worst that can happen is you have some meditation time and a bit of peace and quiet. But this is just to let you know that there's all sorts of stuff going on in our gardens. If you see stuff like that, don't automatically assume it's something bad. Cuckoo bee. This is a cuckoo bee, so it is a parasite. It's a parasitic bee. It doesn't make its own nest. It parasitizes other bee nests. In the case of the cuckoo bee, they parasitise blue-banded bee nests. These are beautiful bees. The one on the left is a neon cuckoo bee. The one on the right down here is a domino cuckoo bee. One of the highlights of my career was seeing my first neon cuckoo bees in my garden. So if you've got a whole stack of blue-banded bees, you might have a couple of these hanging around. She will sit there and watch and wait for the blue-banded bee to leave its tunnel. And then she will scoot down the tunnel, scrape the dirt back, lay her egg, fix it up. Her egg hatches in a couple of days. The blue-banded bee hatches in about 6. So her egg will hatch first, kill the other larvae, eat all the food, and pupate into a new bee. Never going to threaten a colony of blue-banded bees everyone has to eat. But nonetheless, they are beautiful bees. So some of the threats to our bees, this is pretty common sense. You guys are going to know what I'm talking about here. Loss of nesting sites. What do we do with our gardens? We put 10 centimetres of mulch. What do we do with dead trees? We chop dead trees down. There's lots of things you can do to help. So loss of nesting sites is a biggie. I remember going to it's like a CSIRO place at Nambour somewhere, outside of Nambour, and they've got all these crops that they do tests on, and we found all these little native bees, and we said, I wonder where they're nesting. And I went further down the hill, and in a drain, where all the water goes in the drain, you cut your drain and you've got your clay sides, they were all in there. All these little native bee nests were digging tunnels inside the bank that had been man-made because they had nowhere else to go. So if you're in a property, you've got hills and stuff like that, banks are great. Loss of flowers. Folks, our bees only need flowers, pollen and honey. They feed the pollen to babies because it builds muscle, and the adults eat honey because it's sweet and sugary and it gives them energy to keep going. Pretty easy to look after bees. Just make sure you have some flowers. The key thing for our bees is availability and diversity. When our honeybees go to the almonds in August every year for a few weeks, 2/3 of our honeybees go to the almonds every year. That's about 300,000 hives go to the almonds from all over this country. And they're foraging on one thing, almonds. So the beekeepers want to get them back out and back into the forest where they get that diversity of food. A bit like us, right? We need diversity of food. If we eat the same thing every day, it's not going to be great for our health. So loss of flowers, pesticides, it's not great, is it? It's not great for anyone. Foreign pests, feral honeybees, these are all going to be gone soon. Right? The varroa mites here. We had some of the cleanest honey in the world. We're no longer going to have some of the cleanest honey in the world. Hopefully places like Tassie and Kangaroo Island will continue that on. We have varroa mite in here and it is wiping out colonies of honeybees. There will be millions of colonies throughout the bush that will be killed by the varroa mite. From a native bee guy perspective, I'm okay because that's where our possums should be, it's where our parrots should be, it's where our stingless bees should be because they are all nesting in places where these guys should be. So I've seen people put up possum boxes and they end up with feral honeybees in them. Good for native bees, not so great for farmers who rely on that free pollination. So pollination is going to be a challenge for us once the varroa mites, the population will decrease once all those feral honeybees are gone, and then that will be the managed hives that will need to just be a more sustainable level of varroa mite. Anyway, what can you do? Folks, bees need pollen, nectar, nesting sites and nesting materials. Pollen and nectar come from flowers. Nesting sites, bare ground, branches, dead trees, flowers for them to chew. Don't worry too much about what to plant. People say this to me all the time, but what do I plant? I need someone to tell me what to plant. Don't worry too much about what to plant. If you want to get that QR code, I don't know whether it will work or not on your phone. If you're really interested in what to plant for native bees, this takes you to a little PDF that's native plants for native bees. It was written from a good mate of mine, yes. Great question. Okay, I'll come back to that. So we have generalists and specialist bees. Most of the bees in Australia are generalist bees, which means they'll forage on most things. I love a garden with natives and some exotics. Our bees do better in the country, in suburbia than they do in the bush. Because in suburbia, or in the bush, they're always hunting for food. In suburbia, we've got food all year round. So we're in this beautiful position where we can breed bees in the city and send them out to farmers. Especially our stingless bees, they thrive in suburbia because we've always got food. So if you're really interested in this stuff, this is a great little PDF. It was written for the Gold Coast City Council by a close friend called Toby Smith, who is an entomologist. Wrote that for the Gold Coast City Council. Most of the plants will be up here. From the tiniest flower to the biggest tree, the native plants that our bees love. But if you're in a small block, there's no reason you can't get dwarf brevilleas and dwarf baranxias and dwarf lily-pillies, etc. It's all there. Our stingless bees love things like rocket flowers as well. So plant some herbs, let some go to flower. It's pretty easy to do this stuff. Don't get too wrapped up. Just plant flowers. Coming back to the varroa mite question, does it affect our native bees? Short answer is no. The long answer is the varroa mite biology is such that it is designed to dig in through the scales of the honeybee and suck on its tissues and weaken that bee. It's often not the mite that kills the hive, it's the virus load, because there are 5 viruses that affect honeybees, and when the bees get weak, there is a virus overload. We know that those weak bees are then visiting flowers and leaving traces of virus, and we know that our stingless bees are picking up that virus. All the science has been done. But we also know that right across Asia, where we have stingless bees and varroa mite, hasn't been an issue. So fingers crossed, should not be a problem. Okay, how am I going for time? I'm going all right. So what can you do? Install a stingless beehive or a log. You got to buy these things. You can't. Don't be fooled into buying an empty box and thinking the bees are going to turn up. I think Bunnings even had a thing one day where they said, "Come and build a beehive and stick it in your backyard." Right? You have to buy an established colony of bees, and they're not like honeybees. You can't buy a queen, etc., etc., etc. You've got to buy an established colony of bees, and that's a bit difficult at the moment because we're losing lots of stingless bees from weather like this for the last couple of years. Rain washes the pollen and nectar off the flowers, and there's no food for them. So when you're lying in bed and you hear that lovely shower, there goes the bee food for the day. And some of these plants aren't rejuvenating nectar for 3 days. So yes. Yep. Drill it in. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Yep, I'll get to that. So you can install a big, or the easy bit is to install a bee hotel. Just don't buy Bunnings. It's garbage. Our bees need at least 100 mil. If you're coming to my bee hotel workshop, I'll go through lots more about bee hotels up there. They need at least 100 mil because there are pests that will get into them. No hollow bamboo. That's cheapies. Bunnings, Aldi, don't worry about it. That sat on my fence for a year. Now, I have lots of bees at my house. That sat on my fence for a year, nothing went in it. All right, don't buy them. Where does that leave you? Make them. They're time-consuming, but they're not hard to make. All right, so for those that are doing the workshop today, that's what you're going to be making today, and it works because I've got a whole bunch of bees in here. So, bee hotels, dead trees. I did this thing, I don't know whether I've got a slide there or not. I did this thing where I had a dead tree. This is inner city Brisbane. I had a dead tree. It's only small. Trunk was only about that round. But I thought to myself, how can I use this the best way? So I thought, well, the leaves have dropped into the garden and mulched that. That's good. The tiny little sticks you can put in some coconut core and put up into trees, and the birds will use them for nesting material. The bigger twigs you can burn in your fire pit or your pizza oven, and then the ash can go into your compost bin. The bigger branches go into bee hotels. And the trunk, I put in a pot, wrapped some plastic around it, put it in a pot, planted some flowers in the bottom of the pot, debarked it, bark went in the garden for the lizards to hide under, and I just drilled holes all over it. And I kid you not, I had stuff in that within a few days. So yes, any old untreated timber you can find, start drilling. The biggest expense you're going to have to buy some drill bits. Up to about 10 mil, between 3 and 10 mil. Yeah, between 3 and 10 mil we'll get most of our bees. You will get mud wasps, you'll get different types of wasps, but these are solitary wasps. They're completely fine. Yes, they can sting, but they literally come along and they make a nest and they seal it off and they leave. And then their babies hatch and it does all that. It's not like a perennial nest of hornets or paper wasps. So you've got the wasps getting the bugs from your garden and you've got the bees pollinating. What a great team. Leave some bare dirt. I said 70% of our bees live in the ground. So leave some bare dirt or build something. Reduce digging. Biggest killer of native bees in Australia, digging up your garden. So just be careful when you're going to dig your garden because you've probably got bees underneath there. That's our biggest killer of native bees. Other nesting sites, things like daylilies. Cut off the flower, leave the stem, it dries out. That's a bee hotel. Agapanthus is the same. If you don't like the stems, pull them out, crunch them together at one end, wrap them up so that they've got an entrance, because you've got to have a blind hole on your bee hotels. That's why hollow bamboo doesn't work. If you're going to use bamboo, you need to cut it off behind that little knuckle. You know what I mean by that? When you've got a piece of bamboo, you've got these knuckles here. Right, so if you're using things like garden stakes, chop it off just underneath that knuckle, you give them all this space. That's a bee hotel. You're probably already doing some of this stuff at home. Lantana, bee hotel. We have reed bees that chew out the pithy stem of lantana. So if you've got lantana, bundle it up, hang it off a branch. It's not hard, folks. This is really, really easy stuff. And this was an old olive tree we had at our old place, and we just left all of that twiggy stuff. I used to go out there with a torch at night and find all sorts of stuff roosting. Male bees, dragonflies, butterflies. It was a whole ecosystem just in that understory of a tree. So really important to give our insects places to nest or to... Just pretty good, eh? 4 minutes? So further info, Australian Native Bee Association, if you're interested in that, it's I don't know, $50 to join a year and 35 concession or something. We're having a Native Bee conference in Cairns on the 31st of July for 3 days. That's going to be fun. You can look at me at Green Soul on Facebook or Instagram. Follow me if you like. I do all sorts of bits and pieces. AussieBee.com is a great website. It's Les and Ann Dolan, who are gurus in our native bee world. They have described many of our native bees, and they have lots of information on there. Books are great. I'm a science-based educator. Our trouble with social media, everyone's an expert on social media, right? So we see lots of myths being perpetuated through social media constantly. And as an association, we're just not going to get involved in those arguments. So this is the one, if you wanted to follow one Facebook group, this is the one to follow. It's administered by Megan Howcroft, who is a bee scientist and the current president of the Australian Native Bee Association. 82,000 followers, and she doesn't put up with any rubbish. If someone starts stupid comments, she just cuts them down. Yes? The aerial flights of... so for stingless bees, it's a 3-hour workshop. Sorry. Stingless bees are fascinating. That's a whole other hour or two I could talk about what they do with their mating flights and so forth. I don't have time to cover it today. I don't do honeybees, but I know all about the stingless bees and how they go through that process, yeah. And they have swarms and all these sorts of things, so that's a whole other workshop. Sorry. Yes? Okay, great question. Don't put them on the ground. They just get ants. Don't put them on top of a retainer wall. They just get ants. These ones here, they're called my rustic bee hotel, and I put a little clay block in here for blue banded bees. And I've had blue banded bees nesting in 2 of these already. Now, I can keep that at about that height and still successfully get blue banded bees in, even though they are a ground nesting bee. But that height, right up to here. I have posts and I just have them on brackets. I got stacks of bee hotels all over the place. So just not somewhere where ants can easily get to, because they'll go in and they'll chew out all the old material and stuff like that, and then they'll start making their own nests. Yes? How many individual bees across the world? Well, I only started counting last week. There would be billions. So it's 25,000 different types of bees, but within those types, there's millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions. Yeah, right? Lots. That's all I've got. I've got like a couple of minutes for questions. Yes?
So with the lantana stand
Yes.
or other similar things that you would do,
Yep.
does it need to be stable? Like, does it need to be attached to a branch?
Yeah, don't let them swing around. Same with a bee hotel like that. If you want to put it up into a tree, that's fine, but just use 2 bits of string so that it keeps its orientation, because the bees they'll hone in and they'll know their way. So yes, with something like that, I would just literally tie that to a branch or something, or hang it from a branch. But you can get a pot and just put all your garden stakes in at an angle. Reed bees love those little. Reed bees and masked bees will go into these little garden stakes and stuff like that. Yeah. Any other questions? Are you doing the workshop? Yes, you do get to keep it and take it home. And I've got a whole bunch of other cool stuff to show you. Yes. You got tickle bees at home? Yeah, we do call them tickle bees because when they're walking on you, it sort of feels like they're tickling. Yeah, they're good fun, aren't they? Yes. Yeah, there's wasps. Wasps are there. But wasps are okay. I mean, they're getting the bad stuff. You just don't want paper wasps right here. You want them up there. Right? They'll go and get all the bugs and the grubs from your garden. So they're okay. Yes? Yeah, sorry, it's sold out. Yeah. It's just a little bee hotel making workshop. Look, if you jump on my website, what do I do with my business cards? I'll have some business cards up there if you want to come and have a look. agreensoul.com.au. And I run workshops from Fairhill Nursery at Ninderry, Northey Street, Ipswich Visitors Centre, Trevellyn Lifestyle Centre at Ipswich. I run workshops all over the place. And they're generally 3-hour workshops. And we'll do stingless bees, we'll open a hive, taste some honey straight out of the hive. We'll split a hive, so you go through that process, taste honey straight out of the hive. And then we do solitary bees, learn all about them, got some videos and stuff, and then make a bee hotel take home. Yeah.